Could you imagine what would happen if our government decided to ban processed foods? Now, the average person might imagine nutritionists everywhere celebrating, but there's a little more of the story than just that. For one, our economy would tank. The USDA stated that food and the related industries contributed over $1 trillion to our GDP in 2017, and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition stated that more than three-fourths of those food purchases came from moderately and highly processed foods. So think of the economic impact that would have. Not only that, but millions of working Americans in the fast food and restaurant industry would completely lose their jobs. Aspen Institute notes that the restaurant industry provides millions of job opportunities to immigrants, workers with few formal qualifications, and young people just starting out in the workforce. So think of everybody at risk there. Not only that, but hardworking Americans like you and I would be unable to have our occasional unhealthy snack of Oreos or pizza, and the fun would just be taken out of food. Now, some people think we should do away with processed foods for a variety of reasons, but they fail to realize that we need processed foods for stability in life. As Floridians, think of hurricanes, for instance. The first things to fly off the supermarket shelves aren't things like celery and produce. They're things like canned beans and Kraft mac and cheese because we know those things will last. We grab it first because despite the instability in weather, we need stability on our plates. And health organizations like the Calorie Control Council praise processed foods for just this. They state that natural disasters are often coupled with loss of power and closures of stores and restaurants. In these situations, processed foods may provide the only sole form of nourishment. On top of this, think of low-income families. With money being tight, processed foods are often all that they can afford. Researchers from the National Center for Biotechnological Information found that many low-income households depend on processed foods. They state when income drops and family budget shrinks, food choices shift towards cheaper but more energy-dense foods. Low-cost, energy-rich starches, added sugars, and vegetable fats represent the cheapest way to fill hungry stomachs. So ultimately, getting rid of processed foods would put these people at risk. But advocates for the ban on processed foods often put up the same old arguments to support their case, but their logic is always flawed. For instance, they say buying fresh food is cheaper, which is a pretty common misconception, but research from Harvard School of Public Health actually shows that healthier diet patterns, for example, diets rich in fruits, vegetables, fish, and nuts, cost significantly more than unhealthy diets. Now, they often say things like obesity is the number one cause of death in America, and that processed foods are creating a public health crisis. And again, this is a misconception, and it's actually caused from the media. This claim needs some deeper examination, and according to the CDC, the number one cause of deaths is heart disease. Now, while poor eating habits can cause heart disease, the Mayo Clinic also states that smoking, excessive use of alcohol or caffeine, and medications as well as dietary supplements also cause heart disease. Also, the CDC states that most heart disease deaths occur in people 65 and older, so we have to consider age here too. Finally, they'll claim that the FDA doesn't do enough to protect the American people and that we need to do further action in the government, but they're ultimately wrong. The FDA is always criticized in this argument, and the truth is they do way more than most people would think. For example, in 2018, they banned trans fats, and if you didn't know, trans fats raise your bad cholesterol levels and lower your good cholesterol levels, according to the American Heart Association. But most Americans didn't even know that happened. The FDA looked out for us even when we weren't looking. Now, I think I've made my argument pretty strong as to why we should keep processed foods in production, but I can understand the opposing side really just wants a healthier American diet in the end. So rather than leaving their voice unheard, I think there's a solution to this debate that would help both sides be happy. And it's simple. Compromise. Place heavier taxes on processed foods and subsidize healthier options. Both sides would get to keep their food on the market, and healthier choices would be economically encouraged. This has actually been discussed by lawmakers and researchers for the American Public Health Association, and they believe that a federal junk food tax appears feasible. Not only that, but researchers from the Journal of the American Medical Association found that with a modest 10 to 30% tax on most processed foods, healthy foods such as fruits, nuts, and vegetables could be subsidized to cost pennies to consumers, which would be perfect. This solution would have so many benefits. For instance, consumers would be encouraged to purchase more healthy foods with the subsidies. Researchers from Oxford Academics Nutrition Reviews found that a subsidy of 12.5% increased healthy food purchases by around 10%, which could save lives because public health would be better and hospitals would unclog with patients because people would stop coming there for food-related health problems. In the end, banning processed foods or limiting their production would really just cause more harm than good. So rather than banning them altogether, let's use legislation on our side to encourage healthy eating while still letting us have dessert. You can help with this. Attend those city hall meetings, email those lawmakers, and make your voice heard that you want our government to tax the unhealthy foods and subsidize the healthy ones. So ultimately, we can all be happy. Thank you.